Hi everyone, here with you today for a little bit of teacher talk. What we're going to take a look at is just a very quick overview of what is called the 5E model of lesson planning. It's often used in science. It was developed out of Colorado Springs with a group, its acronym is BSCS. You could go and look at it further, but they've done a lot of research on lesson planning, and they came up with this 5E method that they have found a lot of success with, and teachers around the world are using it. So I'd like to introduce it to you today, and from there what we're going to do is we'll be taking a look at a short little model lesson with that. So the 5 E's, well obviously there are 5 words that all begin with, you guessed it, the letter E. First part of the lesson is the engage. This is where you might use a phenomena, something to really grab your students. It could be something as just a picture, a photograph, but something to really engage them, to make their curiosity really pop up. All right, so engage. After engage, students are then going to use what they brainstorm and get to what we call the explore phase. This is where they're actually doing an investigation, where they're coming up, they're going to be doing this experiment, and they're going to be exploring. Oftentimes they're carrying out a controlled investigation during this time, and it's can be framed, teacher directed, and so forth. And I'll be giving you an example in just a moment. The next step after that explore is explain. Okay, at this point the students are taking a look at their claim. Do they have evidence that supports it and explains what happened? All right, so they're taking a look and coming up with a conclusion or that explanation. From there, the next important piece is that elaborate. And in that elaboration point, that's where students are going to apply what they've learned, okay? By that thing when they were exploring that they came up with, they came with an explanation, they might take a look at it in another setting. All right, and lastly, evaluate. A lot of times we think of paper and pencil tests, and that often is used in the evaluate stage. But also we're evaluating throughout the process through formative assessments. You know, give me a thumbs up, fist to 5, all those formative assessments ongoing. But in that evaluation stage, you're using a summative assessment of some type. It may be a student presentation, does not have to be a multiple choice test, maybe notebook entries that they're putting in. It could be an electronic, some type of presentation that they make. So all those are possible for that evaluation stage. Well, I've taken something simple and I thought, you know what, let's take a look at this and let's see if we can, quickly utilize these steps. So we're going to do that with an example. So we're going to start out with our engage, okay? And we're going to do that with a little organism I have. That's called a superworm. One thing could do is I could just start with a photograph of it, where students are coming up with wonderings and asking questions about it. Or I could actually get a superworm, and these I just picked up at a pet store because they're often used as food for reptiles. And this right here is a superworm. They're similar to mealworms. They're a little bit bigger, a little more active, and that's one reason I like to use them. And they're also very inexpensive, and they're harmless. They're not going to be hurting any of your students. All right, students are going to come up with all kinds of wows and wonderings when they're looking at these things. They may also be using hand lenses and doing all kinds of observing, maybe going and making a sketch. You will have some students that are going to be afraid of these. Please reassure them that they're safe, but don't get them to a point where you're forcing them to handle them. Typically what I find is students who are standoff and squeamish with them, they eventually in time will get more comfortable with them. But they are still working with that group that is making their observations. So anyway, the majority of your students are going to be very curious and coming up with questions and really want to interact with this superworm. Students then, you'd want to bring them together in this engage phase, okay? So we're still at engage, and to ask them what they notice and what they wonder. Okay, here are some wonderings that are going to lead us in our explore phase. Like, I've had students ask when we were discussing this, do they prefer a rough or smooth surface? How many legs do they have? Do they have a brain? Do they prefer a rough or smooth surface? How do they react to sound? How do they react to water if they're on a kind of a wet, moist area? Do they prefer shade or light? So you're going to have a whole bunch of wonderings, which is awesome that students are going to share out. From there, what I like to do is look at, okay, friends, what's researchable? What is something that we could do an investigation on? What's an investigative question? Or what's a research question? So do they prefer a rough or smooth surface? I think we could set up an investigation there. So that could be one we could try. How many legs do they have? Well, that pretty much we could just research and look up or count them. So that wouldn't be so much of an investigation. Similar to, do they have a brain? That'd be something we just research and not carry out an investigation. Well, eventually you can have students either decide on one investigation that you'd like the whole group to do, or what's ideal, especially with older students, is you can have them, each group, take on an investigation. You would have to obviously have the materials ready for them. Well, we're going to take a look at a whole group one that some students did, and that is, do superworms prefer shade or light? So now we're on that explore phase, okay? And so our students went and they set up this investigation, and so I gave them paper plates. I had one that I cut in half, a smaller one. That's going to be our shaded area, and this will be our light area. From there, students are to take the superworms, put them in the start, and then they watch where they go. They see where they go. And you can see this one quickly went into the shade. Now, it's a good time to ask, oh, now it came out. So I typically would go with what it goes in first. But the point of this is now we're doing that explore phase, okay? And so then the students are gonna record. Now, I like to have a template for students to use. And so I like for them to have a question, the prediction, and then from there, their data or evidence, and then making a claim from that. That is going to help us move into that explain phase. All right, so our question right up here, do superworms prefer shade or light? Had their group made a prediction before they actually carry it out? They predict that they're going to prefer light because it's warm. Then we came up with our data and evidence. We talked about number of trials. Should you do it just once or multiple times? They tried it 10 times. Well, 8 times it went to the shade and only 2 it went to the light. So therefore on their claim, we never say that their prediction was wrong, because the only wrong prediction is if you don't make one. But in their claim, they found out that from their data, that they seem to prefer the shade, okay? Now, so with that, they come back as a whole group. Each group is sharing out what they found in that explain phase, that they found out that they were going to, that they're going and they're making this claim that the superworms preferred shade. You can talk about maybe why that was, what some ideas that they may have of why I preferred it. We won't know for sure, but they may have some ideas. All right, then we're ready to move to the elaborate. Okay, and with the elaborate, they could try another setting. Like, what if they went and held a flashlight up to the superworm? Would that superworm, would it go and move away from the light, or would it stay in the light? Okay, maybe they could look, if they set it by a corner of the room, would it crawl under a board or something like that? So the elaborate is taking it and applying it to a different situation. Okay, so taking what they found, their data, and trying it in their claim and trying it in a different setting to elaborate on that. They could also maybe just test some other organisms too that are similar to superworms in that elaboration phase. And then from there, the evaluation phase. Okay, this could be a good time for students to share out a poster, what they found. And also adding on, this was our one in our explain phase, but adding on that elaboration phase, what they found out, and sharing with other groups. It's great if you can have groups that have done different investigations sharing their results too. But what's also pretty cool is if they're all each group is doing the same investigation, sharing those results and seeing if each group got the same results. Now it's important for scientists to share their findings. Well, in summary, I hope that you find that 5E method to be an effective way in instruction. The other one myth that people often think is that all 5Es need to be done in one day. No, not the case. This example I did with a group of third graders, and it took us 3 days to get through all parts of this. So don't ever feel that just one single hour period needs to encapsulate the whole 5E method. All right, stay curious and have fun.